The perfect start to a big month for Norwich City. February feels like a huge opportunity, and Norwich City have made the first dent into what hopefully will be the start of them moving away from the Championship drop zone. Welcome back to the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast. I'm your host, Connor Southwell, joined by Paddy, Davitt. We've just made the trip up the hill after that home victory for the Canaries against Blackburn Rovers today. Not huge amounts in terms of the actual game itself to talk about, but plenty in and around the game. Injury concerns as ever. We've obviously had the transfer window close. We'll give you some of our reflections on that in the second half of the show. But Paddy, first and foremost, it felt like today, if either team would win the game, it would be pretty big in terms of what it meant for their respective championship seasons. The fact Norwich City have won it is probably another sign under Philippe Clement they're heading in the right direction.
Yeah, because for me, there were echoes of Watford at Carrow Road, which was the final game of 2025. Similarly, very lacklustre, very laboured, both teams in both those games. But that night, Watford, and it was a poor goal as well. It was the one that deflected off McConville and wrong-footed Kovacevic, and Watford get the win. And probably didn't deserve it. And you could argue today, if that had ended a draw, maybe there wouldn't have been too many complaints. Certainly for the first 70 minutes, there was very little in that, very little goal-mouth action. I don't think there was a shot on target in the first half. But, you know, to underline the point about progression and this journey that they're on under Clement, even in the face of, and we'll unpack that as we go, but the fresh adversity around injuries and unavailability, pre-game, in-game, they fell the right side of it, and it wasn't a fell fortuitously. I think Clement impacted it in terms of his substitutions. Those substitutions, namely Oscar Schwarzer, really came to the party and had a huge role. But also, it has to be recorded that I thought the home fans today, when they needed to play their part and lift a group who were probably struggling a little bit for that inspirational spark, they did provide that energy. The volume levels noticeably rose, I thought, in the midway through that second half, and Clement was the first to acknowledge that. And to be honest, his post-match demeanour was fairly muted, maybe even, a bit morose, mainly off the back, I think, of maybe those injury elements now that will play out in the days to come around Makama and Jallo. But his face did light up when I put that to him about the fan base, because he has spoken routinely about, and again, most recently on Friday at his pre-match, he feels that's there now, that connection, which clearly wasn't there. He even talked about he'd watched videos of those first 7 home games and how toxic it felt for anybody who was there. We all know, we lived through that. That Carrow Road was not a great place to go, and certainly wasn't a place to enjoy watching a team in green and yellow. That is completely changed, and this head coach doesn't take that for granted, but he knows that is there now. And even in a situation like today, where for 70 minutes the home fans haven't seen a lot to get excited about, to put it mildly, they sensed that was their moment to step forward. And then off the back of that, the players were able to find something to get the job done. And that win now, we're just recording as the later afternoon games are coming to a conclusion, but it looks quite a favourable set of results so far, and Norwich have done their element, and noticeably putting a bit of daylight between them and a Blackburn team who at kick-off were 1 point behind them. So, what feels like quite an important swing now, they go to Oxford, and we know the games that are coming up at teams in and around that end of the table. What a great start to this cycle, and this could be defining now, and to achieve the win when they haven't played really anywhere near. I mean, this in contrast to Wrexham, but more so West Brom, more so Coventry, maybe even Middlesbrough in terms of performance, even though the result went against them. This was way below those levels in terms of what they were doing on the ball in chances, taking those chances. But it really does, to me, signal that the evolution that Clement is taking this group of players on, that even on a bad day, you could say, in terms of performance and in terms of what they did with the ball, that they find a way to win, because that I don't think we would have seen earlier in the season under his predecessor. So, for me, wrapping it all together, by no manner of means the best day under Clement, but they got the job done, and that's a great attribute to have, that even on a poor day, relatively, in terms of performance, they found a way. And, it now even allowing for maybe the negatives around fitness and players who've maybe going to be sidelined for the foreseeable. Not just today, but the ones going into this game. I think it gives you a degree of confidence that, as he has shown all through since he came in the door, that Clement can navigate a path through what feels, on the face of it, very difficult terrain, and yet still have Norwich moving forward, moving up the table, getting more in touch with that middle tier of clubs than looking over their shoulder. And those are the big bonuses for me today, not necessarily how they achieved it, but the fact that they did achieve it.
Yes, and I think you summed up where I was going to move to in terms of you take some of the results and performances of kind of recent weeks where they went to Wrexham and it was a very different win. They started really well, got themselves ahead, then they had to kind of roll with the punches a little bit in the middle of that game, and then kind of found another gear to go and win it. West Brom, which was again, first half was a little bit cagey, but second half they blew them away. Coventry clearly going a goal down, but throughout that evening playing very well and eventually deservedly winning that game. Middlesbrough last week going toe to toe with one of the best teams in the league. Today wasn't that. It's not going to win many points for aesthetics, I don't think. That game of football generally, I think it was 3 shots on target in the whole thing, and 2 of those were Norwich City goals. So that tells you really that neither goalkeeper had a huge amount to do, but when it mattered, Norwich found the gear. And I guess that is the big shift, isn't it? Because you think back earlier in the season where, even in games under Liam Manning where they had patches where they were okay, it would kind of spiral the later the game sort of went on and developed. Whereas now it feels like under Clement, this is the kind of one of the big elements that has improved for me. They stay in games much better, but also they're able to kind of stay for the course a lot longer as well as games go deeper into them. They know that probably even in games like this, if you can keep your opponent at arm's length, you're going to get an opportunity or two to seal it. And the fact now they're just being able to win in slightly different ways is probably indicative of what he's creating, which, as he said, is hopefully a culture of winning, but also that muscle memory of what winning feels like. And I think it's, including that Walsall game, it's now 5 wins from 6. I think they've won 7 games since Boxing Day alone. I mean, for context on that, this is an NCFC numbers stat. Steve Sanders, who obviously does some brilliant stuff there, put this out there. 7 wins from Boxing Day. You have to go back 36 games to get the next 7 games that Norwich City won. So that all shows, if you push it together, irrespective of how they've done it, different ways to win. The fact they are winning games, that consistency that he spoke about, does feel like they're beginning to turn a corner. And Ben Krezene summed it up nicely. It feels like we're beginning now slowly to look up the table rather than sort of over our collective shoulders now.
Yeah. And as Clement said, yesterday, it can't be, and you drill into that, and of course the Carrow Road element, because it contrasts so sharply with what went before. I think prior to today it was 8 games under Clement at Carrow Road, League and Cup, 5 wins, a draw and 2 defeats, and obviously when that was put to Clement, he said, well, I'm not really, it's not about home form, I want home and away form. And because that's how you find a consistency, and that's also how you, if you can manage to do that, then you will find yourself going up the table rather than one step forward and then falling back again. And it's not just the results, but it's, as I say, it's performances that aren't, as he said today. No team in the Championship will be able to perform at their maximum every week, game in, game out. It's just it's the nature of this league. It's an arduous. On occasion, it's less about the aesthetics. It's more about just the ability to resist and to show resilience and character and grit, and they had to probably do that more so today than you contrast today with those games we've referenced, where they looked a real good side going forward, and they looked like they had threats and they had a potency at the top end of the pitch and a fluidity of movement and some good technical players, and then a goal threat at the end, and players like Makama and Slimane again today, and Ali Ahmed in recent games as well. But those really, for me, were not the keys to this victory today. It was, as you said, hanging in there and not finding ways to lose the game, and that's important as well, because I do go back to that Watford game that they probably walk off that pitch with a draw, and it's not the worst result. You could even maybe throw Stoke in there, which came a few days after, and a game that went late and 0-0 and not a lot in it, and Stoke, and that probably isn't maybe a more pertinent parallel because they scored 2 late goals and got the job done that night 2-0, and you could probably argue that there wasn't a lot in that game, but for Norwich to I mean, if that stat there, that 7 wins since Boxing Day, that really does show it's an acceleration in terms of a lot of the good trends we'd seen under Clement, yet still within a little bit of a feeling of good and then bad, good and then bad. But now, if they've ironed that out and the consistency is to the point where even when they're not at the best performance-wise, they can still get a result in this league, then, he says quite often that that's what separates the good teams out, is that they can go again and they can go again, and they just they don't get complacent, they don't get tired of winning games. They just have that hunger, or they retain that hunger, and they know what they need to do in the situations that they find themselves in, and that is, as he said a few times recently, for by some measure, the youngest squad in the division. That's quite exciting moving forward. Yes, okay, in the short term, we know what the objective is. It's to try and avoid getting embroiled in a real full-on end-of-season relegation battle. That looks like they're going to achieve that with a degree of comfort, I think. But it's beyond that. It's the what next. And if this young group are now arming themselves with the tools that they need to navigate all that the Championship throws at you, and of course on your good days that'll take care of itself because you hope there's enough quality in this group and they'll add to it clearly in the summer, no doubt about that. But it's what you do in your bad days, and your off days, and I don't want to hark back to those Farker years, but it wasn't all champagne football. Those 2 title-winning seasons, they did have to show different sides, and they did have to be a bit more resilient at times, and we maybe overlooked some of those periods, but there was nevertheless times when they didn't play well and they got the job done, and that's what this group now need to find. And Clement knows that. He knows exactly what's required, and if we emerge through this, what felt a potentially tricky little spell, with teams in and around them who have that desperation to try and pick up points for their own ends, but if Norwich can come through here with a good haul of points, then allied to what they did against Coventry and what they did against Middlesbrough, and prior to that, the Southamptons and the Prestons and the Sheffield Uniteds when they were going well, then I think rightly, if you're a Norwich fan, you're licking your lips at what next season and beyond brings under this head coach, because you can take things for granted now, but you shouldn't forget how low they were as a club, as a set of fans, no doubt, and as a group of players when he walked through the door, and the amount of work it's taken to get them to a point now where they are still not out of the woods, but 4-point gap and quite a pack of clubs between them and the bottom 3 now, shouldn't be taken for granted or downplayed. What an achievement that is so far under this manager, because the bar was so low, and really it was a club in free fall. Let's not make no bones about it. So, good in the short term, but for me even more better in terms of the mid to longer term outlook now with this guy at the helm.
Yeah, a couple of stats for you on that in terms of where Norwich are tracking. So if Clement essentially, I think, would have taken this group on the points that they are taking, they'd over a whole season, they'd be they kind of finished the campaign, I think, about 75, 77 points, which is pretty good range for the Championship. But also, even if you take his current points per game for the rest of the season, I did this pre-game, so it might be slightly higher now, but they're currently tracking to beat last year's point tally, which is remarkable. I think before this game they were tracking 59 points. So I think it was a point or two higher than what they got last season, which, given the context and where they've been, would be remarkable if that's the way it pans out. Obviously, it may well be, maybe it'll be higher or lower than that, but for that even to be a conversation is pretty remarkable. Obviously, in terms of today, Paddy, the changes really were from the bench, wasn't it? And this probably quite pleasing, I would imagine, if you're Philippe Clement, because you look at some of the squads that he has had to name in his time as Norwich City's head coach, where there hasn't maybe been that depth or those options to come off the bench and change a game. There was a double change he made on the hour mark. Oscar Schwartau came on, Sam Field came on, obviously Mo Toure came on. That was enforced, that one slightly earlier. And really, it was Oscar Schwartau, and I said this to you in the press room and in my verdict as well. This is where you kind of almost scratch your head a little bit at kind of stats in football, because Oscar Schwartau's created 2 goals for Norwich City, and he's walked off the pitch without a goal or an assist to his name. I've been really open about it. I think he's a real talent, 19 years of age. What he can do on a football pitch, the way he glides, the way he carries the ball. If he could add output and goals and assists to his name, I think quite quickly he would catapult himself into a realm where he was quite attractive for other football clubs. Yeah, I mean, he felt to me like the real difference today, in amongst some other clever and cute changes that Clement made. Field coming, I was probably in real time a little bit frustrated Wright came off, because he sort of looked at the game it was turning into, and it felt like it was going to be about unpicking with the ball. But actually, I felt Field added a layer of control. Chris Gorham, when he came on later, added a busyness and yeah, just his pest-like qualities in that kind of 10 role was a really nice dynamic that we hadn't quite seen. So probably all of the changes in different ways were impactful for the right reasons, which is a sign, as you say, of a proactive head coach, a capable one, but also it's on those players for coming on and really grabbing that game, particularly Schwartau.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, you don't want to, in error, sort of direct praise into the wrong areas, but I think it is fair to state that that has been the architect of that win was Clement, because at 0-0, 70 minutes on the clock, it's hard to feel that with any confidence Norwich are going to go on and get the job done, because the evidence in the first 2/3 of that game was not to inspire a huge amount of confidence. But what he wants, what any head coach wants, is the ability to turn around in a game like that and feel I can impact this now and affect it in a positive way from the bench. But that's only really going to happen if the players that he then introduces are able to step forward. And so I think you have to say on both measures, particularly, you know, Schwartau clearly because of his pivotal role for both goals, but I think the second goal only comes from a Chris Gordon header, and then the defender does slip, which allows Schwartau to run on and then have that shot that comes back and Toure finishes it. But Clement did actually interesting reference Chris Gordon and his impact, and I've not heard him say that post-match before, but he really felt he did add something in that role. And that's a good sign moving forward, irrespective of, you know, what's going to happen with other strikers, fitness-wise or otherwise, because it felt for me that you look at it, and obviously they've gone out and they've brought Toure in over this January window, and we know they tried to get Hogue as well, that maybe Chris Gordon isn't naturally a player that Clement would view in terms of his attacking mix, but you just feel there is some raw material to work with there if you are, you know, Philippe Clement, and we know how highly thought of he was, and he was their headline summer edition. So, you know, if he could be unlocked and plugged in to what's already building there in terms of some of those other elements at the top end of the pitch, then that would be a very interesting development moving forward, because he's clearly, his goal record prior to arriving at Carrow would tell you that he has the ability to score goals. There's absolutely no doubt about that. It's just maybe the other elements to his game. And you forget, you know, he is still a very young man relatively. I think he's 23, 24. Of course, when you've got 21-year-olds coming in like Makama and now Toure, you know, you maybe tend to think he's been around a bit longer, but he's not got a huge
experienced in this squad.
Well, he is, yeah, but really, and his first season in England as well, and he's had those knee-related injury issues. So there's a lot of mitigating factors, I think, why it's probably too premature to say, well, he doesn't look like a profile of player that Clement will necessarily use moving forward. I think there is still a story to be written there. And as for Schwartau, yeah, I mean, we both said it, not being wise, but, you know, at 0-0, he was going to be the game changer, we felt, because prior to, there was a lot of, there's a lot of lateral stuff going on, really. Norwich didn't really, I mean, there was a few darts from Kellen Fisher early on in the first half where they got round the back, but beyond that, I can't remember too many times where they managed to pick ways through that kind of mid to low block that Blackburn set up with when they were out of possession. But his natural instincts are to get the ball, and he's a natural rangy runner. He just wants to stretch the play. He wants to commit defenders, and off the back of that, things happen. And the power that he's got, he's a real powerful athlete as well, physically, an imposing figure, and it is, talking about Chris Gordon and his age, but just to think that this guy is still 19 is frightening, really. And I think he's now up, probably approaching 70 games, senior games for Norwich. It's a remarkable body of work. A lot was made of Max Aarons when he came in, and at his age, clocking up those appearance milestones, 100, 150, 200, and he was still probably only in his early 20s at that point. Well, this guy's, on the same kind of curve, really.
We have to touch wood. I haven't got any wood near me when we say this, but also seems to be pretty consistently available as well. And I do say that with a real word of warning around where Norwich have been, but that's a huge trait at that age as well.
It is, yeah. There's no doubt about it, and that robustness, which there's examples littered in this squad that it maybe isn't the case, but like you, I'd agree. Probably the thing that is lacking is the end product, but for a 19-year-old, he's way ahead of the curve, really. To have got that output out of him this early on in his career, and I go back to when. I remember not being Torrops talking about when they got him in, they really didn't think that was a viable option. They thought his star was much brighter and there would be bigger clubs, no disrespect to Norwich, but there would have been more interest in him. So I think there was quite a coup there to get him out of Bromby when they did. And everything you've now seen in a growing body of evidence suggests that. And I think Clement's been quite canny with him because, he had a little burst. He was one of the very few bright spots under Manning, you would say, because he got that consistency of game time down the left-hand side. But Clement had been quite cute. He's, gave him a run. He's tried him in the 10 role, and then he's just dipped him out in the last few games. And I think you have to be mindful with a very young player, albeit he's got a lot of minutes now under his belt, that there are going to be those dips. And just knowing the right time to pull him out and then bring him back in. And would any of us be surprised if he's in the starting lineup at Oxford on Tuesday? No, I wouldn't. Definitely not.
No, I'm just going to sort of read you some stats here on him, and this is purely on his age, really. So he is younger than Errol Mundle-Smith. I think that's easy to forget. He's younger than Lucien Mahovo. He's younger than Jacob Wright, Rory McConville. And then you contrast that with the sort of amount of starts that he has had, and it's pretty remarkable. Only Matson's Sargent, Fisher, Darling, McLean, and Kovacevic have made more starts than him this season. It's pretty remarkable what he's doing at that young age, and should, in my view, have 2 assists to his name. Just in terms of the game, before we come on to the injuries, Paddy, obviously Mo Toure, who came in this week. We're going to do a big section on the transfer window in the second half of the show, so we'll speak about that in more detail. But for him to come on, let's be honest, he didn't do a lot really in terms of the type of game it was, but to be in the right place at the right time to score on his debut. Do you know the last Norwich City player to come off the bench and score on his debut?
Come off the bench and score on his debut?
Yeah, this is a very specific stat.
A very specific stat. Liam McKenzie.
It was 25 years ago. It was David Nielsen. So a long time ago. So it doesn't happen often.
No, definitely off the bench, no.
So a good way to mark it for that young man. Yeah,
no, it's a great story. And you could see his response in the immediate aftermath. I did say to Clement, when he put Mo Toure put his head on the pillow last night, I would imagine he's dreamt something like that. And he won't score an easier goal, that's for sure. So to get him off the mark, we've seen, dare one say, there's a very, very, very good striker who captains his country for the Free Lions who didn't quite get that one off the mark early in those 2, as it turned out, loan spells. And it
becomes a thing, doesn't it?
It does. The longer. That's my point. Yeah. So, and I'm sure if I could stop and think, there would be plenty of other examples of RVW maybe. Although he did score on his first game against Everton, I recall, but it headed south then, unfortunately for him and Norwich City. And so who knows? Time will tell. But that's a real positive. That a particular young player as well. What a whirlwind he's had. This time last week he's in England to complete a deal. And we've now all subsequently learned a bit about his backstory and what story it is. He's clearly had a life well lived already, despite his tender years, and coming to Europe, and then 18 months later, after doing what he was doing for Randers in the Danish Superliga, he's now pitched into the Championship, and all of that, I'm sure, has armed him with a degree of, kind of a character that is willing to accept these challenges and run towards them, and that's good. That's good, because I think Norwich need players like that who they can just drop in now and look around, like Makama has done, to be honest, look around and not think I'm coming from, no disrespect to lower leagues in England or maybe a league like the Superliga, but, this is a step up, and am I good enough? Can I handle it? There was none of that from Makama this season, and albeit a very, very small sample, but you can just get a sense from his personality, he's got that Aussie kind of character to him where, he'll embrace any challenge that is put in his way, and, who knows? If he notches again at Oxford, then people are going to start talking him up in a big way. But maybe we'll just let him enjoy this one. And what you would say, as simple a chance as it was, it's only a simple chance because he has that natural predatory instincts in the box that he felt something could come off the keeper there, and he was there to slot it. He's got himself in front of the defender. He's not on his heels and waiting for a chance. So all of those elements that went into that goal are quite positive, and maybe justification for what Norwich think they've got now in terms of a player, yes, very raw, still potential, but nevertheless a player of promise who they will hope they can mould into, like Makama has shown, a player who can score regularly in the Championship.
Yeah, power. That was kind of my first thought when I looked at him, because he's big, isn't he, in terms of lean and athletic, and I think we saw a few times the threat on the shoulder to get in behind. It's quite different to what Norwich have got, and I mean this probably links to the conversation we were having around Chris Gore. And if you do look at the strikers that Clement has used since he's come in contrast probably to Chris Gore and Sargent, who's powerful, he's athletic, can play well with his back to goal, but also can get in behind and stretch. Makama, who's very much that, athletic, big, rangy. Toure today, likewise powerful, quick, all of those type of elements. Chris Gorin probably quick with the mind rather than with the feet, and a bit more technical and just a little bit different. So that maybe feels to me like the trade-off that is being made. He wants that sort of real focal point up front, I think. And you look at Toure in terms of his physique, I think he could definitely be that, albeit the fact that he's raw. And I think we saw a few times in front of goal maybe that sort of clinical edge, that instinct that he showed for the goal maybe wasn't there in other moments. But clearly that's the element now that if Norwich can refine quickly with strikers, as we've seen with Makama, you get them in a place where they're scoring goals regularly and they're in a good rhythm, and they get talked about in terms of what comes next and who comes next and the sort of money involved, and that is the model that Norwich City are in at the moment, and that will be obviously the next step with him. We mentioned Makama, and we end this half of the pod really on a little bit of a regular theme of injuries, Paddy, because we turned up today, we got the team news, we got the team sheet, Papa Amadou Diallo. It felt like another opportunity like we did last week for the first time to see Ahmed on the left, Diallo on the right, in a game where it maybe felt like Norwich were going to have more territory, more possession. You'd hope for them to kind of get those players on the ball, running at players 1v1. Felt like a really exciting prospect. Only for me to look up halfway through the warm-up and see Diallo trudging off the pitch early and down the tunnel. He was subsequently replaced by Tony Springett, and we obviously await the news of that injury, but it doesn't sound particularly good. I'll let Paddy come in on it in a moment. And then in the second half, and if this doesn't sum up Norwich City's season with injury, I don't know where it is. What does? Sorry, a ball gets played forward. Carter of Blackburn slips. As he slips, his hand comes out. Makama, who's running past, lands on his hand, rolls his ankle. You couldn't write this stuff, could you, in terms of this season and injuries from a Norwich City perspective?
Well, the nature of that potential injury.
It's almost slapstick.
That was just where I was going with it. Yeah, no, that was, that's not anything other than horrendous bad luck, really. And you fear that Clement added some context around it. It's a twist of the ankle, and there was clearly too much pain. That an attempt to play on ended pretty abruptly. Within 2 or 3 minutes, he dropped to the floor, and off he came. And now we're in that cycle of assessment, scans, and fearing the worst. And we won't second guess or prejudge anything at this stage, but I got a sense from Clement's demeanour around those two injuries of the two that Makama was the one he was more concerned about. I mean, to go back to Jallo, he felt he reported something had gone when he had a shot, doing a shooting drill in the pre-match, and just felt something.
Given he had hamstring, quads, that area of the leg, it's not. That's not great either, really.
I mean, how long was he out with that quad issue? Months and months. So, heaven forbid. But that's conjecture at this stage. Again, we'll await. We should be down there on Monday now to speak to Philippe pre-Oxford. So that's an early touch point, and I'm sure they'll have a clearer sense then. But the nature of these things, already you would fear that it's probably Oxford's going to be a game that are going to have to navigate without either of those two players, and then it's just the extent of both injuries, really. But when you've without Maatsen and Topic, Cernach as well, and
Mate Jurasek now as well.
Mate Jurasek as well. So anybody thought they were out of the woods on this particular aspect, think again, really. So real challenge, and you just hope that there is more positive news in the days ahead. But yeah, I mean, it might not have been connected to that, but I thought it was quite a gloomy, given they've just won the game and the manner they won that game. I thought that was quite a gloomy demeanour from Clement, and you can only think that's probably related to he's maybe gone back inside after the game, and the initial diagnosis from his medical team is not favourable. But as I say, we won't prejudge that at this stage, so we're only 3 hours on from the final whistle, so we'll see what the next 48 hours or so bring. But yeah, a head coach who likes to look at problem solving and finding solutions rather than focusing too much on problems, I think this will even test him if he now goes into Oxford with no Jallo, no Jurasek, no Makama as well. So and for the foreseeable, no Josh Sargent. So
that was the point I was going to come on to, because you throw that into the mix, and from an attacking perspective, it's you find yourself scratching around a little bit again, which is bizarre. I mean, again, I kind of maybe prejudging what we're going to, or predating what we're going to come on to in a moment. But it's a big squad they've got, and yet in certain areas they are absolutely decimated in terms of probably options and quality, but in some cases both.
Yeah, well, I mean, numerous Q&As we did, or any other touch points, video touch points in that month that ended recently with the January transfer window. There was more than one, plenty, in fact, Norwich fans who were querying whether they should be doing something on the right-hand side of that free, given that they brought in Ahmed, and Jallo was, as Philippe made it clear, it felt like a new signing to add to the mix. Yet on the other side, in contrast, you had Springett, you had Jurasek. Okay, Makama can play there, but he's clearly been needed down the centre. But no, that wasn't the call, and they obviously prioritised other areas. There was clearly the late requirement to do something defensive midfield-wise after the Maatsen injury, the blow with Harry Amas in terms of left-backs, but again, they didn't feel that the response to that was necessarily to go back into the window. And here we are, first game after the window closes, and you go into it without Jurasek, and we're not sure where we are with that. I mean, on Friday it was, we need to get him assessed, and he has to probably see a specialist now. He's reporting pain through the foot, but they're trying to get to the point of diagnosing it and treating it before it goes to a fracture. But that doesn't, to me, sound like a short-term return to the action. And then you roll it on to today, and potentially now without Jallo, who was sharing that burden with Ahmed in the last few games. So, yeah, it really does, lead you to wonder what way he would go Tuesday on and onwards if you're without all these options. I mean, it is a bit of a concern. There's no doubt about it, and I'll be interested. I mean, it feels probably at this stage, again, with a big asterisk, we don't know what the next 24, 48 hours bring with Jallo, with Makama. But right here, right now, if we were to assume neither of those are available, for me, it's Schwartau comes on the left and Ahmed switches to the right. But then who leads the line? If Makama's not available, it's probably going to have to be Toure, isn't it? And with Slimane in the mix, that is very unproven and very experimental. But that's where Philippe Clement will be because as you rightly say, they have a very big squad, but in certain areas of this squad, they're a little bit threadbare now. So he's going to have to be creative, no doubt.
He is indeed. Part 2 of the show, we're going to be discussing that squad and where Norwich City squad are at post that winter transfer window. We'll see you in a little bit of a mo for that as we catch our breath. Welcome back to the PinkUn.com Norwich City podcast, reflecting on that 2-0 win over Blackburn that has now definitively moved Norwich City 4 points clear of the relegation zone. We're recording after all of those games on Saturday have taken place. Norwich definitely the big victors in today's results, as I'm sure all of you will have caught up on and seen by now. Earlier this week, the winter transfer window, because it did stretch a little bit into February, slammed shut. Usually in Norwich City's case, it is kind of getting gently pushed, isn't it, rather shut than slamming. But I think they did complete the deal to bring Sam Field in with 13 seconds or 17 seconds spare, depending on who you speak to. And as Philippe Clement said, who was wearing the watch at the time. And obviously the other deal was Mo Toure in the final week since we've last recorded to tick that striker box. So I think that was happening in and around Middlesbrough, wasn't it? So I think we did touch upon that a little bit last week. But it has left Norwich City's squad quite big as we kind of closed part 1, really. It's a big squad, 36, 37 senior players in there. And yet they've got one left back. They're down to probably Tony Springett. Obviously, Forson is coming back, who can play on the right as well, but maybe isn't a natural option. They've got one of those. They've probably got 2 strikers available now. Ahmed really is probably their only senior frontline left winger. It's an oddly composed squad because within that you've got 4 number 10s, you've got obviously the 3 goalkeepers, you've got lots of players who can play in those midfield areas. What's kind of your general thought of where Norwich City squad is at, Paddy, coming out of that winter transfer window?
It's a very difficult one because today's events maybe have shone a light and it feels that there's an imbalance maybe, but the reality is that might not have been the case, and people are saying, well, they've got so many of everything if you look at the sort of names we're looking down on this pitch graphic. So I certainly think it would be a stretch to sort of start throwing around any accusations that that they've left themselves exposed in certain areas. The sheer volume of number of players would tell you they have. If it was not for all these vast number of unavailable players, more than enough options. So, but what can you do really? I mean, the reality is you can't carry a squad of 45, 50 players. I mean, they've probably got too many, way too many now, really, if all were fit and available. But that clearly isn't the case, and it just feels that, unfortunately, that. The focus is at the top end of the pitch, and that's where they have picked up too many injuries really, and it's for me. It's I really would struggle to go with the narrative that it's a reflection on poor squad building or they've left themselves, or why didn't they do this in January? It's the hindsight thing again, isn't it? And the reality is that I'm sure Philippe Clement would like to have done more business, but that wasn't possible, whether it was for football or financial reasons. And he made it quite clear that they were trying to be ambitious in terms of the striker chase element. But I think really, for me, it's Matej Jurasek suffers a foot injury. There shouldn't be. It's not a case that's a blame game or that anybody has dropped the ball there. It's just an unfortunate, state of affairs, as it is with Jallo now in the warm-up today, as it is with, as we've already discussed, Makama treading on a grounded Blackburn player's arm/hand. These are, I don't think these are quite in the same category as some of the case studies we had earlier in the season, last season, where it was players, seemingly the rehab issues were not getting players robustly enough back to the fray, and then they were breaking down again. These all feel slightly different scenarios for me. So, really, it's unfortunate, but I don't think it's a reflection for me on they've got things wrong in terms of how they've put this squad together, because there are simply plenty of options if all those players are available. And it is worth stressing that Forson is now back in the mix. He did train last week. He has played him on the right. I don't think that's necessarily his best position, but he is another body to come back into the thought process for Oxford. Also, it's worth stressing that we've got Paris Mahoma there in terms of the attacking options, and we know he's one that they have tried to manage to a point where he's available for selection. And it felt from really between the lines what Clement had to say on Friday that he would be in very short order an option. So there's two players who were not available today, but who might be, if not for Oxford, then certainly for West Brom in the Cup and onwards, back in the mix. So that tells me that they do have options. Whether they're necessarily options that with a fair wind you would go with. I mean, I'm thinking of Springett there. I don't think anybody would dispute that he probably, for me, isn't quite at the level quality-wise that he can improve what they're trying to do at the top end of the pitch. And that's no reflection on him per se. He's had a tough time over the last 2 years, but I think we would be disingenuous to suggest that Tony Springett is the answer mid to longer term. And that's not to single out him, but that's just to make a point that there are probably players in this squad who naturally will fall by the wayside as we move forward, as we move into further transfer windows under Clement. That much is obvious. But in the here and now, this is the hand he has got to play, and we'll see where he goes at Oxford. But if that's a very long-winded way of saying I don't personally feel it would be fair criticism to look at that squad and then say that is a reflection that they put that together poorly. I just think it's a sequence of events around fitness and injuries that are probably out of their hands on this one.
Yeah, I mean, on the flip side, to focus on that right wing position, which I'm sure is where a lot of people are going today after the injuries to Jurasek, Makama, who is obviously covered out there as well, Giallo, who we've seen out there. The problem is if you bring in another, and this is the point, I tweeted out a graphic of this, and some people got quite angry with me because they suggested I was saying it was quality. I wasn't. I was just listing all the players that they have in their squad. The thing is, if you then go and add another permanent right winger, we got Antti Sienats to come back in the summer. He's still there. Diallo's going to come back at some stage. You've got Forson in the background, as you said, who can play there. Oscar Schwartau, who can play there. Suddenly, you're overwhelmed if all of those options are fit at the same time. You're going to have to, you're going to have a stage where you've got 4, 5, 6 players for one position that aren't making matchday squads. It's just not financially sustainable, really, in terms of the cost, but also in terms of morale as well. And that is a challenge into it. And I mean, even you take their left back situation at the moment, which clearly is kind of laughable in terms of the injuries that they've had. Schlupp, Mahovo, Amas, who comes in and never had an injury, within a week gets a hamstring injury that's effectively going to keep him out for all but the end of the season. Ben Krezene as well. You wouldn't ordinarily carry 4 left backs, and I'm sure they won't come the end of the season. Obviously, Amas is on loan and Schlupp is out of contract as it stands. Even the midfield areas, I mean, Jacob Wright, you've got McLean, Topic, Liam Gibbs is still in there. Gabe Forsyth in the background, of course, who's coming back from a big injury. Number 10, Slimane, Schwartau, Makoma, Emi Marcontes. Like there's a lot of areas in that squad where they are top heavy, if anything. Yeah, absolutely. So I don't think it's a numbers issue here. It's just, as you say, a circumstance of events that have probably led to these areas, because even in midfield areas, because of Topic's ACL and obviously Matson's injury, they've had to go in for Sam Field. And I think the idea that you can kind of overhaul a squad in January, well, in one window anyway, is quite far-fetched, but definitely in January, which is more of a seller's market than it is for buyers. The fact Norwich have got 5 deals done is pretty good going when you look across the league, albeit, as we've made the point a few times, why were they in the market in January? Because of how poorly it had gone. So it was their own fault in that regard. But yeah, it's a squad that certainly, when you look at all the names, if everyone was fit, it's going to need some shedding in the summer. And it sounds like there were, in the back end of the window, particularly with Emi Marcondes, particularly with Liam Gibbs, opportunities that were maybe blocked because of some of these injury issues they've got at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, Clement alluded to that on Friday, partly because maybe with Gibbs, principally, that the situation with Topic, with Matson, required maybe them to keep him in the building. But I'm sure we know there were other players, you've mentioned one, Marcondes, who did have interest elsewhere, Germany, and felt here and now that wasn't the right move for him, and didn't want to explore it further. So, if these players are under contract and they're not part of it here, and that's been communicated to them, maybe they need to want to jump ship. They need to have offers to make it enticing for them to jump ship. And I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a dull summer again, much like the last summer. I think it's going to be very hectic. I think Clement will really want to put his stamp on it properly. They'll have the time, they'll have this headspace freed from a season of trying to, get them winning enough games to get away from relegation danger. That won't be an issue, certainly in the first part of the summer window. And there'll be no lack of ambition from Atanasio and Norfolk Holding. So, that's going to be both inward and outward quite a challenge, but also quite an exciting one, I think, for Norwich fans, because I think the reality is the nature of it coming in November as he did. He's inherited a lot of players. Evidently, some of those players don't fit his eye, and it's just a case of how you move them on and when you move them on. And unrealistic that January would have presented too many opportunities for them to do that. But for the here and now, it's a difficult balancing act, because he has to try and keep as many, certainly the ones who are fit and available at present, he has to keep them on side, and that's a test of his man management, and that they're all buying into it. He referenced that again today in terms of the ones who came on, that they need to be ready to go, and the ones who came on today clearly were and impacted it in a positive sense. And that applies equally maybe to the ones who currently are outside the 20. Jakov Medic today. So, his situation doesn't look particularly appealing in terms of, elbowing his way past a McConville, past a Cordoba, and Harry Darling. Harry Darling, from albeit a very poor start for the team generally, he was the standout. How many podcasts did we do in those first weeks saying he is the standout of the summer business? And now he finds himself on a bench, not able to get past Cordoba or McConville. So that is the nature of it. It's a very fluid situation, and the reality is, I think, what we saw last summer will be repeated again this coming summer, and the squad who probably takes shape for the start of the next season will be very different again from what we're looking at currently. And but that's a process, and that takes a lot of work, and it's unrealistic to expect one window on. Clement would have been really able to sift out what he didn't want and bring in what he did want in the quantities he did want. So that's probably why we're in this. It feels a bit of a holding pattern, really. And then you obviously overlay the injuries and the fitness situation, and that's why we've got almost this kind of. It feels a bit of a skewered look to the squad, where it feels like they are quite clearly right hand side of the three, light now, and left back. But if you have to dig underneath that, there's clearly factors as to why that is the case when you see how many players they've got on the books.
Yeah, I mean, long term, Paddy, and sort of looking ahead to the summer, which, as you say, is difficult to do because it changes all the time, and we can only kind of reflect where we are at the moment. Goalkeeping wise, I'd be surprised if there were any major changes going into the summer with those three. I kind of think back four wise they're set. I think they could probably, obviously, Shane Duffy's out of contract. I think we'd all probably be surprised to see him get a new one. I mean, you can never say never, but Norwich generally haven't given new contracts out to players at that stage of their career since Ben Napper has been here. Jakov Medic, agree. I don't think this has really worked for him so far. It doesn't really feel like that's going to change. So if you're then saying, well, you've got Darling and McConville for that right side, Cordoba and another probably feels like maybe the right way to go. Maybe a younger kind of left-footed option as well. Left back, where you're going to have Krizene and Mahovo there. Is that going to be enough heading into the season, robustness-wise? We'll have to see. You'll obviously have Mirko Topic back, and we haven't really seen him under Philippe Clement. Worth mentioning that I think in his first two games he started Mirko Topic ahead of Pelle Mattsson. So maybe the kind of judgment that we had on him, and likewise probably Antti Sienats, it could be very different when they do get an opportunity to work under Philippe Clement for a long period of time. But obviously you've got Wright, Mattsson, McLean in there. You'd expect McLean to kind of get that option triggered for at least another year. Liam Gibbs needs to get out and play football. Gabe Forsyth has obviously had a year where he hasn't played too much. number 10, again, lots of options. Slimane stepped up, Schwartau, Maghoma to throw into that mix as well. Right side, seeing actually Jurasek spring it, I think, is one of those contractual ones as well. You've got Forson out there as well. Ahmed Diallo, and then you've got Makama, Toure, Chris Gorin, and then still that Josh Sargent stuff to look at. So long term, Paddy, in terms of if you're kind of looking at this with Philippe Clement's perspective in the summer, with the mitigation that I've given you and the people that your answers are subject to change on various events, where do you think areas of this squad-wise they're going to be looking at heading into that summer that maybe requires work, probably in both directions, really?
Yeah, well, I mean, front to back, I think. I mean, as you say, centre-back-wise, in a post-Duffy world, purely on numbers, I think they need to go and have a look at that area of the pitch. But also, I think Clement likes Cordoba seems to me the template of centre-back he wants to work with.
He's been excellent, by the way, I think, last few weeks.
Today, again, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Very commanding, growing in confidence now. He can feel his personality coming through, that he almost feels he has the trust of a head coach in Philippe Clement, who we know wanted him at Rangers. So I could see them looking for another profile along those lines. Forward areas, for me, yeah. I mean, they did the one bit of business technically in the wider areas in Ali Ahmed. I think there's no doubt that right-hand side is an issue that will have to be addressed. And because there is even, with the players who are there and would be here beyond the summer, I don't think they're necessarily in the same bracket and profile of an Ali Ahmed as a Papa Jallo. So that feels a bit of an omission for me. So that would be the starting point, I think. Centre mid, well, I mean, they've obviously got Topic and Maatsen now, and Kenny showing no signs this season of too many miles on the clock. So Jacob Wright, I think he likes, but he clearly needs to show a little bit more. I thought he was, he didn't grasp his opportunity again today. So that feels like an area that they've maybe already addressed. And as he teased on Friday, top end of the pitch, there's a certain Norwegian who he didn't reference by name, but it made you feel that would they, subject to him not ripping up the Champions League and Bodo Glimt winning the thing, which we probably have to put a caveat in, as unlikely as that eventuality is. But nevertheless, if he continues to make headlines, then he might not be an option. But if that wasn't the case, then him or another, I think, is very much on the agenda. If they were willing to commit to that in January, then you'd think there'd be a deeper pool of available talent this coming summer. So I think there's 3 or 4 areas there that, in an ideal world, Clement would want to go and address, that he maybe doesn't feel he either has in the squad currently or maybe enough of that type in the squad. So, and of course, running parallel to that is those ones who we've mentioned a few of them already, who probably aren't going to be part of it and who fall by the wayside and just engineering situations that they move on. So I think it will be, hopefully off the back of a real positive finish to this season, a springboard into quite an exciting summer.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they go around addressing that, and as you say, the overall balance of the squad, which I think earlier on this season kind of felt quite unbalanced. I think there's an unbalanced nature to it now, but maybe for a different reason, for the sort of mitigation and stuff that we've spoken about. I'm quite looking forward to seeing Antti Sienats under Philippe Clement, and in terms of what he sees him as. I don't think you'll see him as a number 9 in terms of what we said earlier, that kind of profile.
He doesn't see himself there, does he? I mean, he's done.
He's kind of said both to me. I think I've asked him the question twice, and once he said when he was playing that, quite possibly, possibly. But that's an interesting one. I'm quite intrigued to see where he kind of slots into this as well. Topic as well, in terms of can he displace that Maatsen McLean one, because still long term, as much as we all love Kenny, at some point they are going to have to try and look to what comes next. Not at the moment, I don't think, in terms of what he's doing there, but certainly long term, 2-3 years, they are going to have a look at that, and younger sort of profile of that. But he probably is still their sort of maybe secondary to Maatsen, their best midfielder there. So a lot of stuff like that, a lot of moving parts to this, and I know Clement has spoken about it as well with strikers, but you kind of think it's probably applicable to other areas as well, maybe a bit more kind of experience and prime age players rather than maybe those kind of younger ones on the edges that we've seen. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they navigate that this summer. But in terms of what comes next, it's a trip to Oxford on Tuesday night, which is again still in the context of this month.
Still 3 sides.
Still 3 sides, to this stands. Hopefully less eventful than last year, where we had John Monroe refusing to play, I think 20 minutes before a team meeting or whenever it was unfolded. That was that first game under Johannes Toure, which feels like an absolute lifetime ago now. But
how poor were they that day, though? How poor were
yes,
they? I mean,
very.
Hanley and Duffy, not a game they'd want to put in their highlights reel, that is for sure. But well, that kind of I mean, actually, it turned out that that wasn't the precursor to in the first period of Torup's reign, because from there they kind of went on an upward curve. But maybe it was a portent of actually how it was going to end, as in badly for the Dane. But well, I mean, they've got a point at Cov today, haven't they? So they may be looking at Norwich as one that they have to win. We were discussing, was today a must-win? I didn't feel it necessarily was for Norwich, but nevertheless, where Oxford are in the table, they're probably not dealing in points, certainly at home. So, that could set up quite a robust affair, I think, because they will, I'm sure, try and soften Norwich up and hopefully, from their point of view, get the job done. But I've got a good feeling about that one. I think Norwich will, allowing for obviously any more gloomy injury news, I think they're now on the sort of the journey that even if they face some adversity on Tuesday night, I would still think they've got enough now to come away from there with. And for me, not allowing Oxford to get any sort of points on them in that sense, I think would represent, off the back of winning today, a good 3 or 4 days.
I've got in front of me the Norwich lineup last time we went to Oxford. Some incredible names in here. Really. Yes, yeah. I'll kind of. Do you want to try and guess it? Or
yeah, go on. I'll have a go. Yeah. So in goal was Mr. Gunn.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Stacey at right back?
Yep.
Duffy and Grant Hanley, of course.
Yep.
Left back. It wasn't Fisher, was it? No. Okay, go on.
Low knee, I'll give you that clue.
Oh, you're testing me now. People are screaming at the screen here. Anybody watching this, go on, pass.
Callum Doyle.
Okay, yeah, of course, yeah.
Midfield free, I'll give you that clue. So free central midfielders.
Forson came on, didn't he, that day? Yeah, Forson came on. But it's got to be Kenny, hasn't it?
Is one.
Yeah. Gibbs.
Is another.
Yeah. Trying to think, no, he'd already gone, hadn't he, old Gabby? But...
You're in the right part of the world.
Nunes.
Mm-hmm.
How dare you mention his name?
I didn't mention his name.
And Fashnat played, didn't he?
Yep.
Yeah. Sargent?
Yep.
Doing quite well, yeah.
Yeah, you are, yeah. Left winger is what you're missing.
Left winger.
Which is a big name in the context of last season.
BS.
Yes. Yeah.
What,
is that aimed at me or is that the initials?
No, it's just his initials. Spanish Iniesta.
If I tell you Adam Eder came on in that game,
he did.
It tells you how long ago that feels.
And was commended for his attitude by Torup, I recall.
He was.
Prior to him departing for Celtic, so yeah.
Abu Kamara also came on.
Abu Kamara.
Yeah.
He was just getting the pen and paper ready there, wasn't he, at that point?
He was halfway through the letter, yeah. Jakob Sorensen came on, Forson came on, Forsyth came on, and the bench was unused subs were Long, Fisher, Hills and Miles that day. So we've come a long way in terms of personnel in that sense. But I mean, in general, Paddy, we kind of spoke about this month and today kickstarting a run where Norwich play all of or 4 of the bottom 5 or were bottom 5 before today. Obviously, one of those is next weekend is an FA Cup game against West Brom, but still an opportunity to progress. Eric Ramsey's still looking for his first win in charge there. That finished 0-0 at home to Stoke. So obviously Blackburn today, then Oxford away in midweek, then West Brom in the Cup. And then you've got a home double-header. Birmingham, who haven't travelled necessarily that well this season. Then Sheffield Wednesday, who are stricken, bottom of the table, and without a win in 8 or 9, I think now it's absolutely terrible how it's going for them at the moment. But they come to Carrow Road. And then a trip to Leicester, who obviously got docked 6 points this week. I think many were expecting that to be 6 or 9. So the fact it's 6, I think they'll probably be quite relieved with that in the end. But that puts them beneath Norwich and crucially just outside the relegation zone. So we mention it in terms of Norwich City's own position, but it's a real opportunity to get a lot of points on the board, to win games as well, and we're still in a stage where that can't be overestimated. But more than anything, an opportunity really to turn what has been a really good run into one where we can probably hopefully stop talking about relegation. That's got to be the aim from this month in terms of points hauls.
Well, I was just, as you were saying that, Connor, I was just thinking, and it's wildly optimistic, but in the next 4 sort of league games, 12 points to play for, you take 9 or 10, allied to what they're on now, 36. Well, you're pretty much at the cut mark, aren't you? 50, you know, they always talk about 50, don't they? So, and I know that is wildly optimistic, and this will look very silly when they've got no points at all at the other side, and we're now fretting about League One again. But I think it's reasonable to assume they'll get they should get a decent haul of points if they continue in the same vein. And Clement, as he was pre-match today, he was very tough on, you know, we can't have any complacency. You know, you've come through Coventry and Borough in the most recent outings, and proven that you can compete with those teams. Don't slacken off against, you know, no disrespect, but clearly, you know, a team who in Blackburn who are at the other end of the table, and now these other teams are also in that same bracket. So it's hard to see how he would allow that to seep into the psyche in that dressing room. So it's not over-exaggerating, I don't think, to say that they come through this swing as they've started today against Blackburn. Then, you know, you get into a point where late Feb, early March, you know, you can probably definitively say that's them secured in the division. And then it is, for me, then how high can they finish? How much more positivity can they inject into what's to come in the summer, and then moving into the new season? And that would be a nice place to be in, I think, rather than, you know, you getting into sort of the other side of Easter and it's still all to play for at the wrong end of the table, and all that tension that would come and anxiety that would come with that scenario. So they certainly do not want to be embroiled in that, and the way they're going, they won't be.
Playoffs?
No, probably just a little bit too ambitious now, I think. You know, I was countenancing a very small percentage chance about 2 or 3 games ago, but I think the reality is now if they got inside the top 10, they've done very well.
Very, very well. Just stay up. That's still my mantra at this stage. Maybe I'm being particularly unambitious, but that's how I view it. And when that's mathematically done, then we can look at maybe what's next. But there we go. Well, one game at a time and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, we will be back after, not Oxford, but we'll be back after West Brom next week. Well, hopefully, we're a bit of a change of pace talking about Norwich City in the FA Cup 5th round, which would be absolutely wonderful if that was the case. Another home draw, please, for anyone who's going to be participating in that draw, providing Norwich get through. If not, who cares? And it's another week where, sadly, I think it's going to be dominated by injuries, but hopefully one that Norwich City can get through with more points. Thank you very much for watching. A really positive way to start February and a big month for Norwich City. Bring on the rest of it. See you soon.